We are so thrilled to have you here tonight. Wasn't that keynote amazing? I love, yes, absolutely, right? I love hearing her speak, and I loved her important message. And she really touched on one of the main things that we're going to be talking about tonight. I don't know if you know the full mission of the Utah Women in Leadership Project, but our mission, the long version, is to strengthen the impact of Utah girls and women by informing, engaging, and developing their voices, confidence, influence, and leadership. I normally can say that, no problem, but just a little stumbling tonight. So, one thing that we hear from women all the time as we're talking around the state is we know our women have fantastic ideas. We know they know how to get things done. But sometimes in our community, in our culture, in the broader culture, it is hard for women to know how to speak up. It is hard for us to make ourselves heard. We know that it's common for women to be spoken over and to be criticized for the way that they speak. And so even though it's so important in our communities and neighborhoods are so much better when we all find ways to use our voices and use them to do good, sometimes it's hard to know how. So we are so thrilled to have two experts tonight to teach us a little bit more how to use our voices for power and for good in our communities. So I'm going to introduce our speakers really quickly. Jordan Carroll is the executive editor of the Daily Herald and Standard Examiner newspapers. So she goes on both sides of the Wasatch Frontier, combined reaching 1 million people each month digitally and thousands of people throughout every week via print in Utah County and northern Utah. She is passionate about local government, voting in municipal elections, women in business, and mental health issues. Born and raised in Texas, she's lived in Utah for 10 years and enjoys the mountain life. So glad. So Jordan will be our first speaker, and then I'll go ahead and introduce Liz as well. Liz, I'm going to say your name because I've always just called you by your first name. Adiola? Okay. Oh, thank goodness. I should have gotten that ahead of time. Liz is the host and producer of This Is Utah. Liz is a storyteller at heart who loves to listen and learn about people's journey through life. She believes that we all can learn something profound from each other just by taking the time to say hello, how are you, and then listen for the real response. Liz has more than a decade worth of experience working as a journalist, was nominated for a Breaking News Emmy, and has been recognized by the Society of Professional Journalists. Liz moved to Utah from Indiana for the opportunity to tell rich, character-driven stories in the place where she's originally from, the desert Southwest. And just this month, Liz won an Emmy for her work as talent and narrative performer for Battle Over Bears Ears. So we'll start with Jordan, and this is an interactive kind of workshop. So if you've got questions, please feel free to ask them because we want everybody to be involved. All right, Jordan.
All right, ladies, let me get set up real quick. I'm Jordan. It's great to see you all tonight. Like Robin said, I am the editor over the Standard Examiner and Daily Herald newspapers. I've been with the Herald for almost 8 years, and the Standard just this past year plus. So I'm extremely passionate about stories and news in Utah and went into print journalism because I love the written word, I love reading it, and I love being able to express other people's stories that way, and specifically went into it so I didn't have to talk in front of lots of people because that's what broadcast journalists do. So please bear with me in case I happen to stutter over whatever I present to you, but it is something that I'm very passionate about, and it's something that I would love to see leaps and bounds and progress made. And I know every single one of you in this room tonight can easily take what myself and Liz talked to you about and apply it in your life immediately. So let's talk about how we're going to help you capitalize on some of those opportunities that you have on things you're passionate about. Let's see if I can work this. Why are we even talking about this first? So, there aren't enough women's voices in the places where opinions are being shared. And to me, that is a big problem, okay? And it's not just that news organizations aren't or are leaving out women in the conversation. Especially in the last decade, many of the big national news media organizations and even smaller ones and community newspapers and radio and TV, they're all looking for more women to participate in conversations, and they're not finding them there willing to do that. So what do we do? Or let's take actually a little bit more about that. There's a couple things I want to talk about as far as the data and the research on this, because there is. Academics and news organizations have both studied to try and understand why we're not engaging and visible in the same way that men are about issues that are important to us. There was a study conducted in the last 10 years that examined op-ed pages on 4 of the largest kind of newspapers in the country: the Times, the Wall Street Journal, LA Times, and the Washington Post. And what they found was that when it came to things like foreign policy, national security pieces, on average, 15% of them were written by women, which is not a lot. And in the Post, the opinion section, only 19% of them were by women, okay? And then the Los Angeles Times and even the Wall Street Journal, that was even less, and it was 13%, which these numbers to me are startling and concerning. Why does this matter that we have fewer women writing about really important things that are happening in our communities and in our country? Is that women look at things differently. Okay, and this was actually in some of the research that has been done right here at UVU with Susan's project. And what they found was that women tend to be more holistic rather than linear thinkers. They usually look for win-win instead of win-lose. And often we are more process-oriented than men, that we also ask different questions that they're not even thinking about, okay? For example, in the government and public policy and government, women bring different diverse life experiences than men. And all of those contribute to the way that our communities function and they're run, the progress that is being made, and things that we try to change. Other studies show that women are speaking substantially less in different situations for a number of reasons. And why that's critical is that speech is a crucial form of participation in whatever form of community you're a part of, and that shapes perceptions of authority. One of my opinions is that as women right now, especially as we're facing kind of some of this data and statistics, we can't overdo how much we want to write, speak, and talk out about the issues that are important to us and that concern you, okay? There's not too much of it. It's not possible at this point. It would be great eventually for us to get to that point. And especially if you're honing in on an issue or a passion that you hold deeply, you can talk about it more than once. You can talk about it all the time. And Susan is a great example of that in forming this series and the research on women in all the different areas in Utah. Speaking out about it once is good, but it doesn't help continue the conversation. Her speaking about it repeatedly over and over again at all the different angles is what has brought us together tonight, and that's what helps affect change. So, our communities are stronger when we hear from those with diverse backgrounds and opinions and experiences. So right now, tonight, I am going to invite you to participate because research-wise, it shows that women need to be invited to become a part of something. They need to be asked that or told that you can do this and you need to try this. So this is your formal invitation. You don't need another one after this, okay? One of the things that I want to talk about in you being able to find those opportunities for you to share your voice on something that concerns you is, one, it doesn't have to be perfect. I can't tell you how many emails and phone calls I get from people all over Utah on a daily basis, and the ones that are submitted and the ones that we work with to be published, they're not perfect, okay? And I guarantee you, a significant amount of the men that I hear from the most often aren't sitting there wondering, should I have written that 10th draft to submit this because I don't know if my opinion is relevant. They always think their opinion is relevant, okay? It doesn't have to be perfect. In fact, submitting something that's imperfect is going to be better than waiting and sitting on something until you can get it to the absolute, just wonderfully crafted position, because by then it might be too late. Another thing is you don't have to read hundreds of books or write dozens of pages on something for it to come to a point where you can speak out about it or submit to a media organization to be published. It's not necessary. In fact, honestly, when someone sends me 5 pages, single-spaced, okay, and it's like one whole massive paragraph, I look at that and I say, oh no, this is too much. And I can't print that. Nobody's going to read it. In fact, shorter is better because it helps people digest things and it allows them to think about it as they're reading, and they don't look at it and feel overwhelmed. And I'll go through some of those details in a little bit. So where can you use your voice to impact change? There's a lot of different ways, written-wise, and that's what I'm going to talk mostly about, and Liz will talk on some other mediums, but that's where I am a so-called expert. And so what that can include is a bunch of different ways, and it's really just going to depend on how you want to approach whatever cause you might have, and how involved you want to be in it. So here are the different ways. You can pitch a story, okay? And that can include including basic information on an issue and your contact information, why you think it's an issue, why that's a current issue, and potential other sources that might be of use so that a reporter can then research and look into it to develop into a story. Yes?
Question on that one.
Yes?
If we do pitch a story, is there a way for us to continue to be involved once we turn it over to the journalist, or are we like, this is it and then we're out?
What I would say is, hey, like this is something I'm very interested in, and I would love to, if you're able to keep me updated on the process, like as far as when it gets published, or if you're going to be doing anything other that, because I would love to be able to share it and put it in front of the people that I know that would want to see it. I would approach it in that way, as far as just letting them know that, like, hey, I want to continue to be a part of this process. Some people aren't. Sometimes people are like, this is what I've got, here you go, and peace, I'm good. And that's okay too. But letting them know that you want to continue to be a part of it is a great thing to do whenever you're pitching them. So don't be afraid to do that, for sure. There's also things called contributed column. So, for example, in our papers, we publish a host of different local columns, and I would actually say a majority of them might be written by women. And that ranges from issues to school psychologists and dealing with children's mental health in our schools here in Utah, or we have one on developmental disabilities and the events and programs and things that are being done locally to cater to that community and their families and to educate the rest of the public on what they're facing. And things like those columns are written by women who are in those fields. They're working at other companies that are targeting those kinds of issues, and they've reached out to us, or we've reached out to them saying, hey, we think you have a really unique perspective in the community that more people should know more about. And would you be interested in doing that? Now, a contributed column is something that's going to require a significant time commitment because usually you're scheduled to produce a column on a regular basis. And, writing 800 to 1,000 words, once a month or even more often can be a lot. We've got a lot going on in our lives, and I understand that. So there are other ways that you can create submissions to get published as well. One of those are guest op-eds. So those are typically published in opinion sections on news media, and that is going to be something that's closer to anywhere from 500 to 1,000 words if they're generous on a single issue. Susan publishes a host of those in newspapers across the state. And those are typically on one given issue. I would recommend data being included that, as well as anecdotes, and that's something I'll go over a little bit more. And those are printed less frequently. So if you're wanting to pursue that, my recommendation would be to have some kind of draft done ahead of time, but then to reach out to the individual at a given organization who would be involved in that department to say, hey, I've got an op-ed on this topic that I would like to submit. What kind of time frame, if you were considering to publish it, would I need to abide by? Is there a certain word limit that you expect? Is there certain times that maybe are easier for me to submit? That way I can get published. And they will be able to give you all of that information, okay? Letters to the editor are, in my opinion, much easier to be published. And those are going to be things that are at most 300, 350 words tops and fewer, even maybe 200 to 300 words. And those are going to be kind of more quick hits, and that's something that you could easily do on a given topic, that on an issue that you see, whether it's in your neighborhood, your community, the state that's going on that you're concerned about. And so it's a lot more succinct, and you have to be able to pack a punch and getting in something that's short. But more of those are printed frequently, so it's an easier way to be able to introduce that, and you can also publish more of them. A lot of organizations will have limits as far as how frequently you could submit a letter to be published. For example, ours is 60 days, because I do have some frequent flyer men who like to submit on an every other day basis and expect to be published, which will not happen. But you can also inquire about that when you submit a letter, as far as how often you're allowed to, or if there are any other stipulations to help you get published. And they should be able to provide that information as well. Are there any questions about any of those pieces so far? Anyone? Yes? So my recommendation in that area would to reach out to a news editor in an organization, and a lot of them should have staff pages on their websites saying, who's in certain leadership positions. And frankly, I would just shoot them an email and say, hey, I work at this place, and I'm educated in this topic, and I have a lot of experience with it, and I would love to be able to write about this topic for you. And then attach a couple examples of something maybe you've written before, whether it's published or not, so that way they can understand and get an idea of what your kind of writing style is. And from there, ask them if that's something that they'd be interested in working with you on. And sometimes, depending on what they've kind of currently got going on, then they'll let you know, yeah, we've got space in, this upcoming issue or area online that we can do. Print's going to be a little bit harder as far as there are space constraints, whereas online, there's not that issue, which is great this day and age. It allows us to publish a lot more that we weren't able to before. Does that help with that? Okay. Outside of news media, letters to your political representatives, ladies. We elected them to be bothered by us. Okay? They work for us. So That means you can send letters or phone calls even to your city council members, okay? Your mayors, your school board members, your county commissioners, and our federal delegation. And a lot of those can be formatted in a very similar way you might format letters to an editor or a guest op-ed and things like that, as far as this is what I'm concerned about, and this is what I would like to see from you, and give them your contact information. And now, granted, you're probably not going to get as much feedback from a level of like the federal delegation as you are your most close, immediate elected representatives, like your city council members and your school board representatives. There are other places that you can also be published and or speak out, and that's going to include places like public city council meetings and hearings, which there usually are not very many people at. So if you're afraid of speaking in front of people, that's usually not an issue, unless it's a particularly riotous school board meeting, which does happen occasionally when you talk about consolidation and school bonds. So there's school board meetings, neighborhood associations, your neighborhood caucus, which is so important. And I think actually the Utah Women in Leadership Project also published a snapshot talking about how few women were participating in Utah's caucus and who were in serving as delegates. I believe it was under 20% or even under 15%. So it's pretty low. Go to those meetings. They happen. That is how our political representatives end up being elected, is it starts on that very low level. And I can tell you, having been to one of my own neighborhood caucus meetings, there's a lot of men, and a lot of them have the same ideas. Well, while they're figuring that out, I can go through some of the other parts. Okay, so after your neighborhood caucus, which you should all find out when those meetings are happening, so that way you can attend. That is your homework from me personally. There's also your faith congregations, and any other kind of groups that you would be actively a part of that you can share some of your thoughts and concerns and feelings on any given issue. And then there's obviously social media and blogs and places like that, which everyone posts on a daily basis, sometimes multiple times. But that can also kind of turn into a cesspool and can take a nosedive pretty quickly depending on who gets on the comments. But those are options. Okay. So, how to use your voice. I want to give you some very specific tips, especially when you're looking at submitting a letter, a guest op-ed, anything written. And that is that you prepare the 5 W's, which in journalism school we learn very early on, and that is the who, what, when, where, why of any given situation. So, who are you talking about? What is the issue? Where is it taking place? When? And why is it important? I can guarantee you if you have those 5 bits of information, you are probably already ahead of the majority of public relation professionals in the world, okay? It's that simple. It really, really is. It doesn't have to be anything that's super detailed and in-depth, but if you can include those 5 key pieces of information in a story pitch or a op-ed or a letter, that's going to help you in getting published and being seen as relevant and timely, okay? Other things that you should include is a brief bit of background information. So sometimes it can be easy for us to jump into a situation and we might have researched a whole ton about a certain issue, and so we know a lot about it, but that doesn't mean that everyone else does. So you don't have to give them the whole book on everything you've learned about it, but catch them up in a few sentences as far as, here's the crux of what you need to know and why we're at this current point. And then if you're pitching a tip or a story, include contact information. Oh, there we go. Contact information. It's pretty basic, but sometimes we forget it. Something that it could also help if you're wanting to pitch a story about any kind of certain issue or event that you might be a part of is including lists of other potential source information. So you know that these other two women are also going to be at this event, and they're very, well-spoken or briefed on the whatever event or issue that you're talking about. Include their names, their phone numbers, and emails, and say, hey, I've already talked to these women. They'd love to speak with you about this as well. And that helps reporters when they look into something as far as being able to cultivate further sources to develop a story. The tip on there, that just goes back to what I said before. Go online to those any of the media websites, and that could be your local media, it could be national media, to figure out who you should get that in front of. Did I do it again? Okay. And if you can't find it on a website, you can call. It's okay. People call still, all right? And you can say, hey, I've got this tip or I've got this letter, but I can't figure out who I'm supposed to send it to. Can you give me the email address or the phone number for them? And they should be able to direct you, okay? So, more in depth on elements to include in a, for example, letter or op-ed. Identifying the key stakeholders, know what the key information is, so that goes back to our 5 W's. Include an honest and vulnerable anecdote, which that is really important because that helps connect your issue to a real life person and how that impacts them and what their story is. And then once you do that, also incorporate data, because really the best way to help get people's attention is to incorporate that emotion and a story within facts that we have. And then ensure that it's timely. And an example of timeliness, because it's really, really important when it comes to wanting to get published, is, for example, say that you're really concerned about our air quality, which Utah is known for having horrible air quality, particularly in the winter. Now, if that's something you're really passionate about and you've decided to write an op-ed on, but you've done it in the summer when we've had a streak of green days and it hasn't been an issue for months, it's not as likely to be published because that's not a kind of current immediate concern, rather than if you were to submit that in the winter leading up to an inversion. Okay? Getting published, especially via the media, is a really great way to share your message. And that key part is really important as far as you've written something and you've submitted it. That's not where it ends. You've got to share it, and you have to make sure that somebody else is sharing it. So that way your impact is broadened. And they're not always going to publish everything you send to them, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't continue to submit or pitch ideas, okay? And I tell people this all the time. Some days there's just not enough space, or they've got a bunch of other people that have decided to submit something all on that same day as well. And then other times there's a famine, and they, if you were to send them something, they could publish it immediately. Sometimes it can depend on the organization too. Some organizations are more limited and some have more availability to do so. So just because one says, I can't do that, doesn't mean that others are going to say the same thing. Shop it around. It is okay. And then if none of them will pick it up, my recommendation would be that you reevaluate your submission and see if maybe your timeliness factor is an issue, or if there are other missing elements that we talked about that need to be reincorporated. I'm going to wrap up because I am getting close to my time. Okay. This is the interactive part. Okay, so let's talk about an issue that's important to you. And we can kind of role play through this, all right? Anybody have something they're really passionate about and they want to know how to go about that process? We're going to work through it right now. Yes.
I am really passionate about being able to get mothers home so they can be an influence on their children and be able to make money from home so they can afford to have a good quality of life.
Okay. So, let me recap that so I make sure that I've got that. So you want more women to be able to work from home so that they can be able to be with their families, but also have that financial income and stability. Is that about right? Okay. So what are the 5 W's for that? Who? That's women who are working, and particularly women that we want to be able to help work from home. Where? Is that specific to Utah County? Okay, so it's Utah County. So that's good information to know as far as who you need to target. When? That would be immediate. And that's one that's a little bit, the timeliness on that could really be any time because it's a constant issue. And then why?
Because there are so few women that really finish degrees and they
Sorry, just for the people who are streaming. So
Sure. Because there are so few women that are completing education degrees, and once they quit going to school, their opportunities to maybe get an education, to get a better job, doesn't happen. So it's I think, a viable option for women, but they may not know that it's available, and so they just keep working at Walmart.
Okay. Now, do you have a background as far as like being a resource for that, or with your career or your education, or is this just like personal passion outside of those
Personal
realms?
passion, because I was an elementary school teacher and would see exhausted moms come. But I have been in the home business arena for 30 years.
Okay. Awesome. So in this particular issue, what I would say your next step of action would be is then that could easily be a letter to the editor. And if it's something that you feel like you have enough, maybe some additional data on that exists elsewhere, and maybe some personal anecdote from women that you've interacted with as a professional, that you could even craft into the length of a guest op-ed and submit that. Now, when you're approaching that, what I would do is reach out and say, hey, I've got this letter, but there's a lot more I feel like I could say, and another 500 words on this. Is this something that you would be willing to consider? And then start that conversation with an editor.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
So if I were to approach you that way, and I
Yes.
wanted to know current data to see if it's improving at all, maybe I'm just delusional and it's not an issue, would it be possible to have questionnaires or get more current data through your papers?
That would depend. I would say that's when it would probably veer into a story tip as far as, have you looked at this issue in our community? What have your reporters found? Or have they not reported on it? And is this something that you can look into as far as how many women are working from home, how many women are in a more traditional job setting, and how many aren't working because that flexibility isn't available, which is a huge issue in Utah. And at that point, then I would say, if that research doesn't maybe already exist or it's not ready available, it would be a great idea to pursue as far as doing a full-length story. All right. I am pretty much done. So, in conclusion, my advice would be go with what you're most passionate about. And this applies to anybody who's writing, period. I tell my reporters this, and as women, I'm going to tell you this. What you're most passionate about is going to come across the most strong. It's going to come out in the way that you write and the way that you communicate, and that's going to invigorate other people to care about what you're concerned about, okay? Don't wait until you know everything to begin speaking up, because then that could be never. It is better to do it now, even if you feel like you don't have everything together, everything that you need. Just dive in and don't worry about doing it perfectly, because there's a lot of people that are doing it and it's not perfect, but those voices are being heard, and that helps move change forward, okay? And that is all I got, because I'm going to pass it off to Liz.
While I'm getting ready, you guys can stand up and stretch for a minute. I know sometimes sitting down for a while, you can get...
Real quick, for those of you in Utah County, or if you know women up north, I just realized I should have put a slide on there with some of our contact information, because you can send us letters and you can send us guest op-eds. And I work with the editor directly that coordinates it for Utah County, and I coordinate it directly for Northern Utah. So that makes it super easy, and all you have to do is say, hey, I was at this event and I'm submitting this letter, because it matters. So let me give you my email to write down. That's going to be Carroll, and that's spelled CARROLL, at heraldextra.com, and that's HERALDEXTRA.com. Or if you're up north, or you know other people up north, it's my same name at standard.net. Okay? And I'll be happy to connect you with whomever we have in our office to get you slated for publishing. Here you go, Liz.
All right, thank you guys so much for your patience. Sorry about the delay. Just to reintroduce myself, who I am, I'm Liz Adiola. I'm a host and producer at KUED. I host a show called This is Utah, where we go around the state covering different stories about culture, about adventures, and about the different unique people that make up Utah. I moved here from the Indianapolis area, where I was an anchor reporter. And originally, I'm from Arizona, though, so I'm happy to be a lot closer to home. And I'm sorry that I have this light show going on behind me, but I'm going to try to just keep going on even without the slides for right now. I was going to start off with a story that really resonated with me during my journey, my career journey. It was a story about a young woman who would ride through a kingdom, and she would tear up everything in sight. And on one day, the king, they finally were able to capture this woman, and they arrested her, and they were going to put her to death. But the king said, no, what we're going to do is we're going to make her walk this plank and hold a cup of water. And on one side, we're going to put people who are going to be cheering her, who are going to be encouraging her, saying, you can do it, you can make it. And on the other side, we're going to put people who are spitting at her and telling her she's going to fall and she's going to not make it. And so they put the woman on the plank, and she walked across carrying the water. And when she made it all the way across, the king said, how did you do that? Which side did you listen to? And the woman said, neither. I just focused on the cup. And that was something that was so crucial to me growing up, because I didn't come from the best background. I didn't come from a place where people cared about your dreams or where you were encouraged to read. I was actually yelled at for reading all the time and made fun of a lot. But when I read that story, what resonated with me is that a lot of times you have these goals and these dreams and aspirations that you're trying to achieve, and you'll have people who will encourage you sometimes, and you'll have people who will doubt what you can do. But if you just focus on that dream, on that message, on what you really care about, you'll be able to succeed and make it through no matter what. Because sometimes people are nice, sometimes they're not, But if you stay focused on your goals, you'll be able to achieve those goals. So that was the story I wanted to open up with the slide. Sorry it wasn't up there, but so now you know a little bit more about me. I'm from Mesa, Arizona, and I grew up with a huge family, a crazy large family. A lot of people never thought there were black people in Arizona. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, I see black people all the time. I have like 50 cousins and aunts and uncles, and one of the things that I loved the most about my family was that they loved to gather around and have big meals and dinners, and they would talk all the way until like almost the sun came back up again. And while they were telling these stories, that's when I figured out that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be able to listen to people's stories, and I wanted to be able to tell stories as good as some of the strong women who are in my family. So I went to Arizona State University, went to the Walter Cronkite School of Broadcast Journalism. I checked off the box. I got my bachelor's degree in broadcast journalism. I got a minor in political science, focusing on international politics. I did just about every internship I could do. I worked for the PBS station at Arizona State University part-time, and I also worked for our public access station. So when I graduated, I was sure I was going to be a reporter, and I was going to be able to jump right out there on the front lines. But I ended up working for General Electric for a company called Care Credit instead. And what I didn't realize was during those internships was that it took a lot more than just showing up on time and grabbing the scripts and reading the copy and making sure that the anchor's copy was okay and running the prompter correctly. While I was at those internships, I missed an opportunity to speak up in a voice that was true to who I was. And that was something that I learned later on after I graduated was crucial and necessary, not only to just do the basics when you're at these internships, but also to speak up and use your voice and not feel like you're lucky to be there, but you earned your spot and you're there for a reason to speak up and to use your voice. So I landed at General Electric working for a company called Care Credit. It was an incoming call center. If anyone has ever had a call center customer service job, you know how fun those can be. But I went in and I was like, you know what? I'm here for a reason. Oh, it's working now. No more seizures. Hopefully nobody had seizures. I'm here for a reason. Oh, but the clicker's not working. Okay, all right, I'll keep going. I'm here for a reason. There's something that I can learn while I'm here. And I became really good at talking to people who are not the happiest. Oh, that's me and my sister and my brother and all my family. This was when I was telling the background story about where I came from. Okay. All right. What I learned was I'm here for a reason, and there's something that I can learn while I'm here, answering the phones and talking to people who are not the happiest about their situations. And so while I worked at Care Credit, I took every opportunity. I joined every committee. They had a newsletter. I wrote for the newsletter. And so I was just doing everything that I could to make an impact while I was at that job, while still following my goal and applying for jobs so that I could get a news job and work at a news station. So sometimes it's about your mentality and about when you wake up in the morning, beginning your day with I get to instead of I have to. With this thought process, you think I get to go to work, I get to have a busy day, and whatever it may be, we often dress our opportunities as stress, but in fact, they may be blessings. And I didn't know it at the time, but working at that call center was building me up and giving me the skills that I would need to work in a newsroom. So when I finally landed my first news job a couple of months later, that's me at my very first news job. It was in Reno, Nevada. I worked for KRNV, the NBC station, and I was working the graveyard. I got to work the graveyard shift. I was an associate producer, pretty much the assistant. I was, taking guests on the morning show to the green room. I was writing the entertainment section of the scripts and making sure everybody had everything that they needed and running the prompter. And I was in the zone. I was having a great time. And one night before my shift, I would usually have to be at work at, I think it was 11:45 p.m. My boss, my boss called and he said, hey, we have an opening, unexpectedly, a producer opening, and we would love you to fill that role. I think you've been doing a great job. You're a great writer. You have a great attitude, and we would love you to become the noon producer. And I'm like, oh my gosh, at the #1 station, and I've only been here like, yes, I'll do it. I was so excited. I jumped at the chance. I said yes. I hung up the phone. I ran to work, and then I thought, wait a second, will I get paid more? I forgot to ask that big question and speak up and advocate for myself. And unbeknownst to me, my boss was getting on a plane to go on vacation, and he would not be back for another 2 weeks. And when he came back, he had the answer to that question of if I would get paid more. He said, well, I thought you wanted to be an on-air reporter. And if you want to be a producer, you can formally apply for the job, but you would have to sign a 2-year contract to stay here behind the scenes producing. Oh, that hit me right there. But that was the first lesson that I learned about speaking up and advocating for myself and trying to speak up right at that moment and not waiting until later to talk about something that's important and crucial to me. So I didn't let that faze me for long. I eventually got a job in Midland, Odessa, Texas as an anchor reporter, and then I moved around the country going to other places, and I kept that lesson tucked in the back of my pocket, and I'm gonna give you guys some tips so that you don't have that kind of experience as well, so you can avoid that pitfall of using your unique voice and how to maintain and stay true no matter what. One of the things that people pointed out to me when I got my first news job in Midland, Odessa, Texas, was that my voice sounded terrible. And I'm not sure if you guys have ever heard a news voice. Sometimes when you're watching a news report and the reporter's voice doesn't sound very natural. Well, that was me. When I started out reporting, I thought that I had to sound super sweet and super nice, so I would talk like this, and my voice was really, really, really high, and I would do stories like this, and it was one person who pulled me aside and was like, please stop doing that. Please don't do that. And I was so appreciative that this person told me what I was doing and told me that sometimes when I was live, I would have one voice, and then when I was recorded, my voice would sound a different way. And so we worked for a while to make sure that my voice was true to who I really was, because I didn't want to come off as fake or ingenuine to the public or to the people that were watching, the viewers that were watching. I thought that that would be a disservice. So sometimes in order for you to be able to have that unique voice, to be able to share your real voice, because we all have, the way we talk to our family and our loved ones and people who know us at home, but when we get out into society and we get out into work, we have a different voice, a different way that we move, and sometimes we're less comfortable with sharing that other voice that we can share so easily while we're at home. So sometimes while you're at work, you have to operate. I learned when I was anchoring that you have to operate in a space where getting fired is your last concern. And I think a lot of us try to put on this perfect persona of how we are because we're afraid that we're going to step on toes, or we're afraid that we're going to say something stupid or look stupid. And when you're trying to be true to your voice, you have to throw all that out the window and just be who you are. And I was at a conference over the summer and met the senior vice president of MSNBC, Yvette Miley, and she had lots of great quotes, so I stole a couple of them to share with you guys as well. She said, "I rent my title, I own who I am." When we put on these titles, when we go to work, it's something that is changeable. It's something that someone else can remove. But who you are is something that you take with you always, and that no one can take away and no one can remove. So never be afraid to share that when you're walking out into the public, when you're walking into work, when you're walking out into those other spaces outside of your home. So who are you? I have lots of questions, and we're not going to be able to get through most of them, but you can print off this worksheet to help you become more self-aware. It's at this website called followyourownrhythm.com, but it says that you should ask questions of yourself like, how do I deal with negativity in my environment? How do I deal with change, new jobs, different fears? How do I deal with rejection? And all of these questions help you understand who you are, and you have to know who you are in order to know your voice, your true self, and what you'll stand for and what you won't stand for. And so that's one of the first steps, is to understand who you are. And I have another quote from Yvette and also Darla Miles. When you're using your voice, you should be fearless. Darla Miles, who is a reporter at WABC, says they may not like you, but you can make them respect you through your work. Sometimes you don't even have to speak up, but you can have your work speak for you and for itself. Find needs and meet needs. Don't wait for anyone to make a decision, just do it. And when you're the problem, acknowledge it and own it. Don't make excuses. When you're using your authentic voice, be fearless but not reckless. Your brand is bigger than the argument. Sometimes you'll have to table that argument first, and arguments aren't about the impetus, but it's about how you respond. When you have a conflict, go to the individual. Don't go against groups or don't go against big groups. Try to take on the issue one by one, and take 5 minutes. Sometimes you can't go or respond in that moment. And I'm going to talk about some of the ways that, there's one example that really stands out to me of someone who believed she was using her voice, but was actually using it in a negative way. But her action of using her voice in a negative way helped someone empower hundreds of thousands of people. I'm not sure if you guys heard of this, but there was a traffic anchor out of Dallas who dressed a certain way, and a woman went online and decided to talk about her clothes and how she dressed and how she didn't approve of it. That woman, her post went viral because the anchor responded to that post and stood in her truth and was like, this is who I am. I'm a larger woman. Sometimes clothes look different on me. There's nothing really that I can do about that. And this is how I presented myself when I got the job, and no one else has, complained about it. And because she stood in her truth, not only did that post go viral, but she was able to help empower thousands of other women who deal with shame, who deal with people trying to troll them on social media. And it became a whole positive movement where one person was trying to shame this person for how they dressed on the internet. So sometimes before you post, you'll have like a little voice that tells you, maybe this isn't the best thing to post. And that would have been a time to listen to that voice. Yvette Miley, once again, another great quote. Men are frequently wrong, but they're never in doubt. Speak up and speak up often. How many of you guys know that that is true? Men are not afraid to share their opinions. Even if they're wrong, they just share their opinions until we try to tell them that they're wrong, and then they like to fight and argue, and then you show them the proof that they're wrong, and then they finally shut up. So, speak up and speak up often. Don't be afraid to share your opinions or to share your voice. Some of the tips with dealing with conflict, because a lot of times, as a journalist, we go into meetings every day and we have to pitch story ideas to people about what should be covered. So while you guys are pitching ideas to us, like, hey, we want you to cover this, we have to take those ideas and try to pitch them to our bosses and our producers to actually get them on the air and get them on television. And sometimes when that would happen, people would steal my ideas and pitch them for themselves. And one way to deal with those people who like to take what you've said, instead of staying in silence, is right then and there at the meeting say, I like that, you understood what we were talking about earlier when I shared this idea with you. My concern is, and then you can say what your concern is, and I suggest. And you can use that to help diffuse lots of situations in a peaceful manner without things getting negative. And here's an example of a woman that I met while I was covering stories in Indiana about using your voice to inspire other people. And I hope it plays. Will the audio play? Yep. All right. It's just a short clip.
I have heart failure, kidney failure, sugar diabetes, high blood pressure.
Loretta Wesley admits she could be in better shape, but it's the shape of her city.
Okay. All right, so this woman is 66 years old. She's had heart failure. She's had all kinds of medical issues, but she didn't let that stop her from joining the 10-Point Coalition in Indianapolis and walking the city streets to try and stop crime. This was a summer where there had been a lot of shootings, and this woman, she could barely walk, but she decided to go out and join people. And a lot of the people in the neighborhoods, a lot of times are afraid to speak out, especially about gun violence, especially about crime in their city. And yet this woman, this older woman, would not be silenced and decided to speak out in order to try and motivate other people. So I was sharing this story just to say that you don't have to be a certain way, you don't have to be young, you don't have to be agile. Anyone can use their voice to inspire. All you have to do is speak up. And a lot of times when we're going out to do stories like this, we're asking people, like, begging people, please talk, please, share your concerns about your neighborhood. And people will be like, oh, I don't know, my hair wasn't done today. Can you just show my feet instead? Are you a part of the witness protection program? Please. We just need a soundbite for the story. So, I think people remember more so what you say and how you make them feel than if you have one hair sticking up. And a lot of times reporters and photographers who are out there covering these stories will tell you if you look distracting because they don't want you to distract from the message that they have on air. So use your voice to inspire, use your voice to help educate people about what you know, and also to impact communities.
Welcome to
And these,
This is Utah.
oh, now you can
I'm
kind
your
of hear it a
host,
little
Liz
bit.
Adiola.
Do you feel like you're on Mars right now?
I'm Liz Adiola, and I am so excited to take you on a quick trip around the Beehive State for this episode of This is Utah. He's pushing boundaries and making people think outside of the box, one green Jell-O mold at a time. What was your favorite toy as a child? For me, it was a Rubik's Cube like this one right here. Don't ask me to solve it. We don't have that much time. Every summer, people take streamliners, roadsters, motorcycles, and more that they build in places like this to shoot the salt and try to set a world record.
Whoa!
Oh my gosh,
That
wow.
came off real clean, didn't it?
It did. I
And
felt
Liz,
nothing.
The souvenir from
Thank
the
you.
real yo-yo man.
Thank you very much.
When you're around the Olympic Oval, the need for speed beckons. Jerrica Tandyman answered that call as a child and is now an Olympic speed skater. Catch her in action, she's like fire on ice. So we asked Jerrica to slow down long enough to share what fuels her. The human stories began around 13,000 years ago. Clovis people hunted mammoth here. A walk down.
All right, so that last one, that was the battle over Bears Ears. And I had just been working at KUED for about maybe 2 or 3 weeks. So I was freshly new to Utah, and I dove right into this topic, this issue of what was going on out there with the public lands. And what I learned during that time was that I was so terrified because I had never narrated a documentary in my life. I was terrified today because I've never given a presentation this long ever, and I thought it would be a panel of people, but here I am. But I was terrified to narrate that documentary because I thought, I'm not Morgan Freeman. I don't have a deep, rich voice. Nobody wants to hear this for 30 minutes going on. And, I had all these self-doubts. And even when I stepped into the booth, I was trying to channel Oprah. And I was just like, all right, here we go. Let's bring something else out because I just didn't feel like my voice was powerful enough to carry this story that has been it's been a hotbed issue and also just so crucial and such a passionate issue for so many people. And so I felt that pressure and I was nervous and I was fearful, but I still spoke up and I still did it. And some way, somehow, I got it in me that, well, maybe, if that was all right, I lived, I survived, maybe I could submit it for an award and see what happens. And I won my first Emmy ever for speaking up and narrating and doing this. So I was like, I guess I didn't ruin it. But I really thought I did for the longest time. And if you take anything from this message that's been all over the place, I hope you just take the fact that you have to push your fears aside. You can't live in doubt. You can't listen to the naysayers, and you can't listen to the people that are praising you all the time, because sometimes that's false praise, and it could be also setting you up for failure. You just have to focus on your goal and focus on your dream and work towards achieving that and getting your voice out there and being heard. And I'm a meme girl, so I have lots of inspirational quotes. And when you get to a place where you understand that love and belonging, your worthiness is a birthright and not something that you have to earn, anything is possible. And so I hope today that I help give you guys some tips to amplify your voice and to share with people. When you're speaking up, be informed and educated. Know the value of your story. So many people say, well, I don't think my story is worth being on the news or worth being in the newspaper or that anybody cares. We care. I once had to do a story when I was in Odessa, Texas, about a turtle that showed up at a drive-through window. It was a giant tortoise, but still, it was a turtle, and they wanted me to go live there. So if we could do a story about a turtle, I am sure that you have a story that is great enough to be shared with other people and that other people want to hear about. Make sure that you connect with the key stakeholders. You can go to Facebook, you can go to Twitter, you can follow reporters' pages to see what kind of stories they're covering before you reach out to them and share your story with them. You can see how they cover the news, if they cover it honestly or if they're slanting the news and chasing people down or telling a story in a certain way that makes you feel uncomfortable. You can connect with people before you share your stories with them so that you know that and that you can trust that it's going to be told in a good way and in the right way. And let's see what else. Oh, I love Deborah. Deborah Alfarone says, what you focus on expands when the inevitable disappointment happens, and it will. Feel it, mourn it, move on. When you focus on failure, you'll get more. So change it. Change your focus. It's too important to leave to chance. You're in charge of it, and never forget that. So don't worry about, oh, I'm going to mess up. I won't say the right thing. It's not going to look right. I've messed up like 15 times already today just doing this presentation. But you just push through and you keep going and you make sure that your voice is heard because you have a story to tell. And staying positive doesn't mean that things will turn out okay, but it's knowing that you'll be okay no matter how it turns out. I survived. I didn't melt. I didn't blow up. You guys got some information hopefully today. Thank you so much for being patient through it all, and have a good night.
Anybody got a question? A question for Jordan or Liz? I loved your point about reaching out and following the reporters on social media. I'd never heard that before when we were talking and prepping this, that if you follow them in your own social media, reporters throw out questions all the time. I need someone who's got stories about this. And you can say, I know about that. I've experienced that. I thought that was fascinating and a great way to be able to share your own experiences. Yes.
Yeah, my name is Suavis. I live in Utah, and I am one of the community leader, refugee community leader. And I am from Africa, and recently I went in Africa, and before I went, I was interested in some, topic regarding human trafficking, because I worked as a case worker and with one of refugee communities, so I saw some of our young women, young boys, being given drugs, and I visit them in the detention, and I had that, topic in my heart all the time. And when I went in Africa, I found out that, that some of our young women, young girls are sold every day with human trafficking. And I found out that, when I meet with them, I did, some, conversation with them. I did the interview, and I was left really with heart, broken when I saw what happened to them. And I found out also some, government officials are involved in human trafficking, are also, selling them. So now it's like I came back in the United States, but I feel like I am in the wrong place. It's like I have to speak up. I started to write all those stories and contacting different organizations, but because those women are sold in the Arabic country, and I am thinking every day, how can I really, approach the situation for those women who are slaves in Arabic country, and they are sometimes killed there, and they are slaves, locked somewhere. So where can I start? Because it's something like it's in my new drive. I'm just thinking, where can I start because if I speak up, I may not go back to my country because it's involved in some powerful people. I don't want to be killed or to have my family being killed back home. But I still need to speak up. I am wondering, where can I start? And how can I really make my voice and those women, their voice heard? So do you have any advice? I have a story. I'm writing everything and everything I saw there. And I am also, trying to open a website so I can start, to do some healing section, because I did mental health at University of Utah, so I'm a social worker. So I want just also to help them, because I'm doing this on WhatsApp with those women I left back home, just to make them feel like not to be ashamed, because they are really kind of ashamed when they went back home. They were rescued by some international organization, and they don't feel like they are someone now. And I'm doing that on the weekend on the phone, just trying to help, So what do you think I can do? Where can I start just to make that voice, and probably for, to approach some, field politics for it, when I can ask my country to go to negotiate with those Arabic country to make sure those people, if they exchange worker, they can be protected there, they can be paid, they can be treated like human being. So where can I start? Because that is why I came today. I just want to have some idea. Thank you. Sorry for.
Yeah, I can try. It sounds like you're already starting. You said you're starting a website and you're writing about it, and you're trying to get in contact with the right government officials to get some protections in place for these women. I know in October there's a huge event coming up to end human slavery, and it's here in Utah. And so that, most of the time at those events, the media shows up to cover those events, and you also being there as well and being willing to speak out and to share some of your story could help as well. Did you say, though, that you're afraid of backlash with your family? Mm-hmm.
Many of those people, they can really, they can make some huge damage.
Yeah. So in that case, it's not as easy as just going to the media and telling your story, but I think what you're doing right now is the correct avenue to go down, making the website and writing about it and making more people aware about it and speaking up at events like this. I think that a lot of times people see human trafficking in a certain light, and there's been a lot of work here in the U.S. to make it so that people understand that it's slavery. That plain and simple, it's slavery. And these women, and sometimes young men as well, they have no choice in it at all, and their lives are taken and ruined, and they feel like they can't get out. And so I can get you some more information about that event that's coming up in October,
where I know there'll be more people who are more adept to talk about this issue with you and help you find avenues where you can get your voice heard and get your story heard so that the people can get the help and assistance that they need. Yeah.
I'll add real quick. Is it on? Okay. I'll add just real quick on that. That is one issue that Utah particularly focuses on. Our Attorney General has done a lot internationally, even as far as trying to help alleviate areas that we see heavy human trafficking in, and it even takes place in our state. And he works very closely with an organization called the Underground Railroad, I believe is what it's called. And I would, if I was you, I would reach out to that organization and talk to them and say, look, I have firsthand experience speaking to those that have been in it in another country. What can I do to help make a difference? And me telling my story to you, is that something that you can help put out to the rest of the world? Because they already have a very well-established platform. That would be probably my first step.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your question. Okay, I'm going to give each of you a challenge before we leave tonight. You've had a chance to have some conversations. You've heard some wonderful practical tips, some great inspiration. So I hope we all have an idea in our head. What is one thing that I could speak up about? Everybody got one? Nod your head. Everybody got one? So I'd love to challenge you to make a commitment sometime in the next, let's say, 60 days to find a way to speak out publicly, so you're having the opportunity to make a difference, influence, and impact within whatever sphere it is. It doesn't need to be huge, but some way where you are using your own voice about a topic that you are passionate about and finding ways to understand how you can influence and change. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to our speakers. Can we give them another hand quickly?